Welcome to Fan Lab Podcast. My name is Akansha, and I'm a psychologist and an independent researcher in the field of affective neuroscience. This podcast is about everything that I'm learning in the domain of human behavior. Human behavior at its best and at its worst. So, we're going to talk about everything related to the behavior. How does it get formulated inside your head, inside your body, and manifested outside in the world? A very nuanced intertwining between internal world and the external world. Your psychology, the formulation of the psyche, and how does the neurons actually function? Going deep inside, trying to reveal the aspects of your conscious and unconscious self, and different theories related to it. So this is going to be our way to explore and gather more information and understanding about physiology, psychology, philosophy at times, and more importantly, what's exactly going inside us that is getting manifested outside and how the outside world is affecting the inside. So we're going to talk about a lot of science here, backed by data, backed by facts, evidences, and also going to talk about how different theories got formulated that we are using and which we are discarding along the way. We'll keep on evolving our understanding and knowledge in this area because things do change and more new evidences come up that debunks the old theories. So we're going to try our best to understand them with the current scenario, in the current context, with the current level of information that we have, trying to decipher the research in the best possible manner. So starting off with behavioral biology, let's talk about a scenario. There is this 35-year-old guy having a very standard life, married for 15 years, having 2 kids, 1 dog. Everything seems wonderful, very typical. And one day, out of nowhere, he hits a guy at office right in the face. Totally bizarre, out of character. Okay, no problem. A few months later, his wife of 15 years of happy marriage finds out that he's having an affair with some teenage girl down the alley. Utterly strange. And 3 months after that, he runs away, embezzling all the money at work, disappears completely, never to be seen again. 3 possibilities that can be think in this scenario. First one, this guy is a totally deep creep. Second, he's having the most immature midlife crisis you could ever think of. Third possibility, he has a mutation in one of the genes in his head. And what we will be seeing is this. This is exactly the profile that you get in certain neurological diseases, where it's just one gene that's out of whack. First demonstration of that. Okay, I really want you to think about certain questions that I'm going to put forward and just have a reflection upon those questions and what exactly are your opinions regarding them. Like, how many of you think that there is a genetic influence on sexual orientation? Or does anyone ever thought that it's possible for prenatal events to actually influence your political opinions 30 years later? Or do we ever pay attention to the fact that there is a valid way of using biology to understand who's religious and who isn't? And as long as we are in the terrain of religion, how many of us actually believe in God, or in souls, or soulmates, or evil for that matter? Do we actually believe in free will? Do we really think that we have any sort of control over any happening related to us or to someone else? My point here is that all of this is going to change as we dig deeper into the science of things and also compare it with the philosophical aspect or the real, or as we like to say that, the emotional aspects of things. Because it doesn't seem that everything is very clear in that aspect. It's not black and white for sure. But yes, certain things are definitely in the range of black and white. I also want people to really question or to actually think about that if evolution actually exists or not. Okay, so there is a genetic influence and there is a basic biological difference, sex difference in levels of aggression, which is being mediated by these genetic influences. But there are environmental influences also that mediate these biological sex differences and levels of aggression too. Okay, how many of us actually think that there is a biological basis of sex difference in intelligence? Is it all explained by nature or everything explained by nurture? Or it is actually a magnificent, fascinating, nuanced interaction between this nature and nurture, genes and environment. Now, let's look at these four events here. These events are really different from the very basic, but there is some commonality between all these four events. And these events are having your period, having a brain tumor, eating a lot of junk food, taking anabolic steroids. Okay, the people who don't know what anabolic steroids are those steroids which basically you take to build your muscles. They are like testosterone derivatives, not the natural one. What is the common between all these four events? Having a period, having a brain tumor, eating a lot of junk food, and taking a lot of anabolic steroids. Some of you might think of the commonality between these four events be something related to hormones. Of course, that is right. They do have hormones common among them, but apart from that, let's try to think at some very basic level. They all have something common, and we got to get out here at some point. Now, the common thing among these four events is all of these have been used successfully in courts of law to explain the behavior of a murderer. A number of cases where the fact that a woman was having a period at the time of killing someone was actually used by the court of law to reduce the sentence or to exonerate the person. Our literature shows that a lot of aggression among the females come around the time of their menses. Next one. Now, there is an area of the brain you will be listening so much about in the coming episodes, the amygdala. Amygdala, the fear and the anxiety center of your brain. It is the region of your brain which is responsible to create fear, anxiety, stress responses. And you get a tumor in this region of the brain, what happens then? Number of cases, you get someone who is uncontrollably violent. And again, this uncontrollable violence due to brain tumor in the amygdala has been used successfully in a court of law to reduce the sentence of the person, of the murderer. Junk food. Now, when we talk about junk food, I'll give you an example of San Francisco. Like something like 20 years or 30 years ago, a man named Dan White, a disappointed office seeker, he assassinated the mayor of San Francisco along with Harvey Milk. And as a part of his remarkably successful defense for a double murder that led to a remarkably short jail sentence was the famed Twinkie defense. Now, the argument was that his addiction to junk food, specifically these Twinkies, which are like candies, caused wild fluctuation in his blood sugar levels, which in turn caused him to murder. A disordered thinking, high level of blood glucose. You cannot think straight. That was the defense. Finally, anabolic steroids. Number of cases of people having uncontrolled violence arguing because they were weightlifters and were using these anabolic steroids abusively. So they were taking this stuff at disproportionate levels, and that has got something to do with their violence. Put all four of these together, and we get the first of the 2 points of this entire series, which is sometimes the stuff that is going on in your body can dramatically influence what goes on in your brain. Second critical point. We're going to take a scenario again for this. When you go home, or if you're already at home and listening to this, okay, just imagine that you have settled back comfortably. You're all nice and warm, relaxed, ready to go to sleep. And your heart's beating nice and slow. Think of the following thought. That you know that the heart isn't going to beat forever. Think about your lips turning blue right after conceptualizing this thought. Think about the blood flow slowing down. Think about your feet and your toes getting cold. And at that point, you will probably be increasing the rate at which your heart is beating. And like this, you would be seeing the second key thing in this entire series, which is sometimes what's going in your brain will affect every single outpost in your body. And this series is about this intertwining, this interactions between your physiology and your behavior, the underlying emotions, memories, thoughts, all of that, and the capacity of each to deeply influence the other under all sorts of circumstances. Now, what we are going to be doing with this is we will try our best to understand everything in terms of the context and in the most difficult circumstances that we can imagine, so that we are testing our theories and our knowledge against different realms in the hardest possible way for something to turn out to be more reliable. Because our goal is to understand human behavior, right? Worse than that, harder than that, human social behavior. And hardest of all in some cases, some grossly abnormal human behavior. And if we are going to do that, or at least try to do that, there is a problem in it. And the problem is, technically, it's complicated. It's a huge, messy process trying to make sense of the biology of human social behavior. And just like all different fields where one deals with messy, complicated problems, what we need to do is try to think in some widely interacted way. We all have a strategy that we come up with, a strategy to make things easier. And how do we do that? We do that by thinking in categories. We make boxes, we put things in those boxes, and we understand only within the confinement of that box, that particular thing. We think in categories all the time. We take things that are continual, break them down into categories. We label those categories, and we do that in various settings because it could be extremely useful. But there is a problem in that. And this is not a small problem. The problem is actually huge with categorical thinking. And that is, categorical thinking makes your understanding very narrow and limited. It doesn't look at the whole picture. It doesn't even look at it in the long run. Things become very, very myopic. So, our aim is going to be not to fall for the categorical thinking, because we want to understand things in a more holistic way, from different perspectives, from different realm of studying. But before that, we're going to talk about the first category. That is the category in the psychology department, personality traits. So this categorical representation done in psychology has actually been done by grouping the behavioral and emotional characteristics, putting them through the process of factor analysis, and then we have come up with the big five model of personality. These are roughly five traits, and we humans, which are essentially big, complex, messy network of systems, we all vary on different levels on this distribution of these five traits, which basically means that you have a very subjective combination of these five traits at different levels and at different intensity within you that gives a very unique structure to your personality. These five traits are extroversion, which is your positive emotion dimension, feelings of pleasure, happiness, hope, curiosity, enthusiasm, etc. The other trait is your neuroticism, which is your negative emotion dimension. So all that unpleasurable emotions that you feel, pain, anxiety, fear, disappointment, depression, worry, despair, all fall under this category. The third trait we're going to talk about is agreeableness, and agreeableness is your warmth, empathy. It's like a mother-infant bond, pair bonding kind of a structure. Openness is the next trait, and openness is associated with intelligence, creativity. And lastly, we have conscientiousness, which is basically your industriousness and orderliness. In the coming episodes, we're going to talk about all these five essential traits separately and in more detail. But for now, we're just going to give you a kind of a superficial version of them for the surface level of understanding. Now, of course, there are advantages and disadvantages associated with all those traits, which we call them as virtues and faults. Like, you could be too extroverted. Now, being too extroverted doesn't mean that it makes you too happy. It makes you rather impulsive, a reckless, careless person. Now, neuroticism, which is a negative emotion dimension, and a lot of us think that it's a bad trait to have. Why would anybody want to be a neurotic? Of course, very valid argument. Nobody wants to be neurotic or experience negative traits, but at the same time, this experience of negative trait is very important for us to create character defense mechanisms. They help us to survive against the danger and threat. If you're too extroverted, happy all the time, you are not considering the possibility of things going wrong. You don't know how to protect yourself then. So it puts you in danger a lot. Whereas neuroticism or the experiencing the negative emotion help you to survive the threats and dangers associated with living. So actually, it's not very clear how upset one should be when a mistake or an error happen. For example, you could get up one morning with an excruciating pain in your head. Some of you are going to ignore it depending upon the temperament that you have. Whereas some of you will actually going to get really worried about this pain in your head, which is not explainable. And that will actually create a curiosity within you to get the medical diagnosis done. Now, in these circumstances, it's very difficult to make the judgment which mode of being is correct because the information is incomplete. And we don't know until we have done all kind of investigations associated with it, or if the consequence comes out to be contrary to your initial behavior, initial response rather. Most of these things are determined by your temperament. So people who are high on extroversion would find it difficult to consider it as a possibility of something terribly going wrong. They're going to simply ignore it. Whereas the people who are really neurotic will actually going to rush to medical center and get the investigations done to rule out the possibility of any danger. And if it turns out to be a tumor and not a simple headache, then who knows that what's the right mode of being in these circumstances? So we never know that who is right and who's not. It's just your temperament, and people generally respond according to their temperament. And sometimes the people who ignore are right, and sometimes the people who get worried are right. Now, the other end of extroversion is introversion. Now, introversion seems a lot like opposite of extroversion, but that's actually not the case. It's definitely more than that. But the problem is, we don't have much data that supports what exactly orients introverts. We don't understand the landscape of introverts that well as compared to other traits. And which makes sense also to some extent. The people who are actually introvert won't be open about expressing their true feelings or won't be able to communicate it as well as others do. And without having data points related to self-report or data points related to actually knowing what's going inside their head, it's very difficult to figure out what is the orientation of introverts. Although Kierkegaard, who is a Danish philosopher, basically the first one or the father of existential philosophy, he has given a description of introverts as someone who is a little more concerned with their individuality and uniqueness. These are the people who enjoy solitude. Social interaction essentially exhausts them. So they withdraw periodically from their social bonding interactions so that they can reflect. And perhaps the reflection is used to nurse the idea about their own secret life, their own uniqueness, which they somehow have not been able to manifest in the real world to its full extent. So introverts seems to be the people who are aware of their internals, their individuality, uniqueness, but at the same time have failed to live their life authentically as they would have. And somewhere there is a notion of superiority that lies underneath there. Anyway, that's the limited understanding that we have about them. These are the people who kind of live in a incognito mode with their periodic solitudes, with the idea of who they might really be, and to actually pride themselves on vaguely felt superiority. Now, coming to the other traits of conscientiousness, again, with the conscientiousness, that gets divided into two aspects of it. Industriousness, that is your ability to really, really work hard, to postpone gratification, to postpone your present for the future. And orderliness, which is associated with the organization, planning, and strategizing of life and work. One and the same thing. Even with the conscientiousness, it's very incomprehensible to understand what makes people industrious. Dozens and dozens of tests have been done attempting to find these laboratory measures on which the people who are industrious, they can do better. But we have failed completely to come with any conclusion. It is very tightly connected with the idea of sacrifice, because industrious people sacrifice present for the future. So this notion is very, very strong in them. So you could say that after intelligence, it's actually the industriousness, which is a marked attribute of predicting success at academic and professional levels. And with orderliness, what happened is that, again, we have a very little information about orderliness, but it seems to be more associated with disgust sensitivity. For example, if you take an orderly person and put them in a messy kitchen, they respond with disgust instantly. And all they want to do is to straighten up that mess, clean it, clear it, organize it. So it's very, very connected with the experience of disgust. Orderly people really see disgust at most of the places, and they want things to be very spectacularly clean. Now, the thing with being conscientious, that is being industrious and orderliness, is that it seems like conscientious people really know how to schedule their time. So they're really good at planning, making use of tools like Google Calendar to organize their work. So they're very disciplined at their work, and they like to keep up their words. And the moments when they are not able to keep up their word, they feel a sense of guilt, shame, self contempt, and self disgust. So these are the people who will do what they have committed to do. They're going to organize their days, weeks, and months ahead so that they're always on the time. They're always on the timelines of completion of things. And they're so immersed into their work that they find it really difficult to take a step back and relax. So eventually, being conscientious and being too conscientious can get very boxed and very narrow. So any unexpected outcome and possibility will just wreck them up. They get absolutely anxious and react negatively to unexpected outcomes and possibilities. They're not very good at changes. They're not very good at spontaneous changes. So conscientiousness taken to its extreme can get very repressive very quickly. And we've already seen that. We have already known that these people find it very difficult to take a holiday or go on a vacation or to spend time enjoying life without thinking of work. They're just thinking of the work all the time, and that's the area they can function. Rest other areas, they're very dysfunctional. And this happens only when conscientiousness is taken too far or it's on the extreme end of the distribution. All the traits, to a fair amount of degree, are going to serve you well. It's only the extreme end of the distribution when these traits exist. That's the time when the problems start coming up, and we need to arrange ourselves and our lives to create this combination of traits where everything is serving us well and we are able to counteract the negative influences of the traits which we are really dominant about or are at the extreme end of things. Now, coming to the openness, openness again gets divided into intelligence and creativity. When we talk about intelligence, we are specifically talking about IQ. Now, IQ is very much innate, and unfortunately, there is no data that suggests that IQ can be changed or improved. On the other hand, creative people are the people who like novelty. They have a very high aesthetic sense. So they like art, movies, music, poetry. And there's something about them that gives them this sensitivity to get attracted towards things which are melancholic or purifying. And even with the creativity, it's not the case that everyone is creative. In fact, far from it. If you analyze the creative achievement questionnaire, that takes 13 dimensions of creativity like writing, dancing, music, art, singing, scientific investigation, entrepreneurial activity, architectural activity, cooking, and a bunch of more. And if you ask people to rate themselves on a scale of 0 to 10 on their level of achievement, with 0 being no training or competency in this area, what turns out to be the case is 70% people score 0 across the entire creative achievement questionnaire. And just a tiny proportion of people are outliers, way out. They are creative in many dimensions simultaneously and not just one. So these are the people who are exceptionally creative, and it's a tiny minority of the people. And you will see this pattern of tiny minority being the people who are getting everything done, or who are the richest people in the world, or who are the most creative one. And this distribution is called Pareto distribution, where most people stack up at 0 and just a few bunch of people are out, way out on the top. You can see that in the distribution of income and wealth as well. So now talking about agreeableness, Women are found to be more agreeable than men, and that should not come as a surprise because somewhere agreeableness is linked with the mother infant bond structure. It has been suspected for a very long time that it's the nervous system of the mother infant bond which basically has led to the trait of agreeableness. You need to be very attuned to a newborn. And without having a trait that inclines you to be naturally attuned to it, it becomes very difficult to take care of an infant that requires you 24/7 for several years. So, agreeable people, they hate getting into fights. They just avoid conflicts. And oftentimes, that can act as harmful for them because, in order to maintain harmony and being nice to others, they forget to stand up for their own selves. So, their needs and desires get taken for granted. And one of the ways to identify people who are high on agreeableness, that is, the people who demonstrate empathy, compassion, and politeness, is to actually ask them of their life. And they will describe their life most probably in terms of the relationships they have had over. So, agreeable people, high in compassion, high in politeness. It looks like a maternal dimension, pair bonding dimension, something like that. So, these are the people who are going to value an intimate, close relation over anything else in their life. And of course, there are utility associated with this trait. But one of the ways that agreeable people or agreeableness is the uppermost trait, then that means that you're going to categorize your personality in terms of your connections with others. Downside of it, the more agreeable you are in your equation with others, the more vulnerable you get to be taken undue advantage of. So you can think of these traits as the ways of looking at the world in terms of what are the virtues and the faults that you carry that will help you to make corrections and utilize certain advantages in your favor. Your traits help you to simplify the world. It helps you in figuring out how to orient yourself in life. It definitely reduces your unawareness of your own self, specifically your conscious and unconscious self, who you really are and who you want to become. And that transformation can happen only when you understand who you really are, where you really stand in your trait distribution, and how you can improvise over it in terms of different circumstances. So there are a lot of ways of looking at world and surviving in it. That's why you can be an engineer, lawyer, plumber, a doctor, or a CA, or any of those things. And all those different modes of being exist and function amazingly at their own self, even though they are very different modes of being. So you can have those different personalities and survive as long as you have made sure that you are capable of finding your particular filters and behavioral proclivities that will match the demand of the environment. So you need to find your niche, the place that you feel that your capabilities, your traits serves you the best. And that niche will become an area for you to thrive. For example, if you're high on extroversion, you do have an innate proclivity towards sales or places that requires a lot of social networking. So as such jobs or careers, that's going to be a place where you're going to make a lot of progress. And a happy progress, not a progress that's just killing your soul. Whereas if you're an introvert, you would not want to be at a workplace surrounded by the people who are constantly making social demands on you. Because that will wear you out. It will exhaust you completely. So you want to be in a position that capitalizes on your traits. Because otherwise it's really difficult to work at places which is contrary to your traits. And that's what exactly understanding personality traits or your own personality is about. Finding that niche, a place where your particular skill serves best to maintain. That's precisely what the successful adaptation is. Although at no point it does means that you shouldn't be really working on your weaknesses, because working on your weaknesses and adopting those behavioral tools to expand the width of different skill sets that you can have, different temperaments that you can showcase, is what going to give you a meaningful, deep life that is capable of tolerating a lot of challenges. But that can be done only if you have already found your niche or you're trying to work within your particular temperament. So then you can at least utilize what you already have at your advantage first. So this is what we're going to end this particular episode with. Thank you so much for showing your interest and giving your time to the science and psychology of living. Thank you.